I recently did a video about estimating how much you need to retire, the formula that's used to figure that out, and it prompted quite a few questions. In this video, I want to go over questions about that formula and clarify a few things. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you take a look at it. It's here, and I will also put a link to it in the description under the video. Okay, so the first question, a couple of people asked this: shouldn't I have taken taxes out of the amount being withdrawn from the retirement accounts? And just to run over the formula really quickly, and I won't spend too much time if you've already seen it, but you simply take your total expenses less the amount that you have in income coming in, whether that's Social Security and or other income streams, and then you take that balance and then you divide that by however much you're planning on withdrawing from retirement. In the example, I use 4%, I explain why, and then that tells you how much you need to retire. It's an estimate for how much you need to retire. And this is the foundation of traditional retirement planning. This is the formula that's used for this. Okay, so the question was, shouldn't I have taken taxes out of the amount being withdrawn from the retirement accounts? When I divided that by the 4%, and I came up with that amount, that's how much that withdrawal would provide, shouldn't I have reduced that by taxes? I'm going to say no, because I had already explained that I put taxes down as an expense. So I like to separate out really clearly expenses and or income. I like to just really separate things. I think that it gives us more clarity in our finances. And so I had already considered taxes, I'll say, when I considered expenses. Okay. There's also the fact that there will be so many variations on whether or not that retirement withdrawal is taxed and at what rate, because of what kind of retirement account has been, if it's been funded with pre-tax or after-tax dollars. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. It's a really deep one. But let me just say that I look at taxes as an expense. And they are an expense that we can influence. Not completely control, but we can have a lot of influence on it. So I like to keep that as an expense so that I can know that I can influence it. Okay, so the next question was, are withdrawals supposed to take money from investment returns only? So in other words, she's wondering, is the amount that I withdraw supposed to only come from investment returns? And that's a really, really great question. Okay, wouldn't it be nice if they did? You know, I've talked about in another video where I talk about how you can improve the results you get from using the retirement formula. And I'll put a link to that in the description. You can watch it here. But wouldn't it be ideal if you could only withdraw your investment returns? And, you know, if that happened, then you wouldn't have to dip into the principal. And that would be an ideal scenario, but unfortunately that's not usually the case, because investment returns aren't high enough, especially after that retirement withdrawal amount has increased for inflation after a decade or 2 decades. That retirement withdrawal is going to be quite high. So it would have to be over investment returns in order to do that. There's also the fact that investment returns aren't consistent. But that could certainly be the goal, and that's why a lot of investors have a dividend portfolio, so they can just try to live off those dividends. So that's a little bit of a tweak to the plan. I've talked more about it in other videos, and it also leads me to the next question. Do you include dividends in the income streams that you deduct? Okay, so you know how we took the expenses, the total expenses, and we deducted income streams from that. And I said Social Security in the U.S., most people have that after they're 65 or 62, whenever they start withdrawing. And then anything else you have, consulting income, real estate rental income, side hustle income, part-time work income, whatever it is. So they're wondering, do you deduct dividends from that amount? Okay, so the answer to that question is no. And the reason is because the studies, the research that was done to estimate, come up with that 4% retirement withdrawal, which has now been increased over 4% to about 4.5%. And, you know, that's a whole topic about the withdrawal rate. I won't get into that here. But when the original study was done to determine that the 4% withdrawal rate would work, the investment returns would have been total returns. And total returns include capital gains, dividends, and the compounding of that. And of course, if you had bonds in the portfolio, it would include bond interest income as well. So that was part of the consideration in coming up with the money. So when you deduct dividends, you're sort of double dipping because you're already counting those in your investment return, unless you are really going out of your way to invest in a high dividend portfolio. And I think this can be a brilliant idea for investors. I'll talk more about this, but for investors that have a high net worth and a high amount invested in stocks, and they've really worked to invest in high dividend stocks either on their own, they do their own research, or they work with a financial advisor that specializes in this, or they subscribe to some kind of newsletter or follow an expert that provides information on this, then yes, I would say that you could deduct that income stream. If it's reliable, and if this is something that you're doing and it's consistent and you're really good at it and you have that steady income coming in. Now, I also want to just back up a tiny bit and say the other thing I think that has to be in place for someone to consider dividend income as a steady and regular income stream is they have to have a high net worth, as I mentioned, because they've got to have a lot of money in dividends in order to generate a good amount of income. But they also have to be okay with riding out bear markets because, well, dividend stocks, while they're usually not as volatile as non-dividend stocks, growth stocks, they are subject to bear markets as well. So it has to be someone that's okay with riding out bear markets, and a lot of people are. So that's one thing about relying on that dividend income. So I would say, yes, you could deduct it and count it as an income stream if you're going to continue holding those dividends no matter what happens in the market, and you've got a reliable, you've gotten quite good at having a dividend, high dividend portfolio that's over what would have been used in that estimate to come up with that withdrawal, which would have been, the S&P 500 historical dividend is about 1.7%, So if you're getting 5-6% on your portfolio, I know of one newsletter service that they use about 8 or 9% income for theirs, then yes, you could deduct it from the amount that you need. That would count as an income stream. Okay, that was a bit of a rabbit hole. I hope you stay with me. Let me know in the comments section if you have comments or questions about that. Okay, the next question is, do you include bond interest in the income you deduct? Okay, so that would be really the same answer as the dividends. I mean, you may have heard me talk about how my dad invested in municipal bonds that were yielding up to 25% tax-free in the early 1980s. That is a true story, yes, and that really inspired me to become interested in investing. So in that case, yeah, that would have been an income that he would have, my parents would have deducted in estimating how much you need to retire, because that is a very high income stream. Okay, the next question is, do you lower withdrawals when there's a bear market or when you have negative investment returns? And the way I would answer that is, ideally, sequence of returns risk has shown that bear markets in the years shortly before or after retirement can really blow retirement plans. And the problem is that you're making withdrawals when your investment returns are negative, they're going down. So that's so problematic. So if you can lower investment returns during a bear market, that's ideal. That is ideal. But most people can't. And I think that it's kind of all of this is, it's something that has to be managed as you retire, when you retire. You know, you don't know what's going to happen for sure. So I think that you can use this retirement formula for how much you need, estimating how much you need to retire. And then as you're retired or when you're retired, you just have to see what plays out and make changes. That's why I say I don't like cookie cutter formulas. Nothing's set in stone. And the financial markets and returns and macroeconomic factors that affect the investment returns that we get are always changing from one day to the next day. So we can't always predict or know for sure. We can only use the retirement formula for estimating how much we need to retire and use it as a guide. And it can also just get our mind thinking about, how can I make this work? How can I make this better? Is this risk okay? Do I need to be safer? And really embrace this whole process. Because when we embrace it, we feel more confident and we get better results. And we naturally learn more about what we're doing. We improve our skills. And remember, retire certain.